Ladies and gentlemen, let us cast our gaze upon the current landscape of professional women's basketball, specifically the endeavor known as Unrivaled. For we are witnessing a phenomenon that presents us with a dichotomy so stark, so profoundly disorienting, that it demands a rigorous and unflinching interrogation. We must begin this inquiry not with the cold abstraction of spreadsheets, but with a question that strikes at the very heart of cultural relevance. I ask you to look around your immediate sphere of influence, your circle of friends, your trusted family members, the colleagues with whom you share your daily labors, or perhaps your classmates. Do you know with any degree of certainty a single individual who is actively watching Unrivaled? Let us know your thoughts in comments below. We have received updates, concrete, undeniable news and numbers that paint a picture of a league grappling with a severe crisis of engagement. Simultaneously, we are presented with a counter-narrative, a boastful proclamation from the league itself claiming to be generating $40 million in revenue. Now let us pause and be unequivocally clear about financial terminology, for there appears to be a deliberate obfuscation at play. To the founders, Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart, and to the observers digesting these press releases, revenue is not profit. It is a gross figure, a top-line number that tells us nothing of the costs incurred to generate it. Are they going to make a profit this season? Perhaps. But let us not perform acrobatic feats of celebration just yet. We must first reconcile this financial bravado with the unvarnished reality of the viewership metrics. We must turn our attention to the insights provided by Austin Karp, a figure whose analysis sheds a piercing light on the situation. It is an accepted axiom in the television industry that sophomore seasons are notoriously difficult for startup leagues. The novelty wears off, the initial curiosity dissipates, and the product must stand on its own merits. Unrivaled is no exception to this rule. However, the severity of the decline we are witnessing goes far beyond a typical sophomore slump. We are hearing reports that the league is now down a staggering 47% after 16 games on TNT and True TV. To contextualize this precipitous drop, let us look at a recent contemporary in the startup sports space, the UFL. In its second season, the UFL experienced a 20% drop in viewership. That is a concern, certainly, but Unrivaled has seen a drop more than double that figure, a 47% erosion of its audience. This is not merely a leak, it is a hemorrhage, and yet the league did add a fourth night of programming this season, expanding its inventory. One would assume that more opportunities to watch would stabilize the aggregate numbers, yet the trend line is pointing aggressively downward. Let us dissect the granular data, for it is in the specifics that the true narrative reveals itself. We have ratings from Friday, January 23rd and Saturday, January 24th, and frankly, they are abysmal. The data indicates viewership hovering between 20,000 and 30,000 estimated viewers. It is crucial to note that this likely represents the coveted 18 to 49 demographic, but even with that caveat, these numbers are profoundly concerning. In my estimation, this is bad. Unequivocally bad. It suggests that the hype surrounding the WNBA and its players, a hype that reached a fever pitch not so long ago, has nosedived when translated to this specific 3-on-3 format. One might posit that when new fans arrived at the doorstep of the sport, they should have been welcomed with open arms. Instead, looking at these numbers, one wonders if the culture of the sport drove them away. We must get into the numbers in totality to understand the depth of this irrelevance. The reporting mechanisms have shifted slightly. Websites that once provided total viewership numbers in the millions are now resorting to ranking these programs, which offers a stark relative comparison. On Friday, January 23rd, the Unrivaled broadcast labeled Missed on TNT garnered 30,000 viewers in the 18 to 49 demographic. But look at the ranking. It sat at 131st in total viewership rank. To illustrate the absurdity of this position, compare it to Real Time with Bill Maher. That program also pulled a 30,000 number in the 1849 demographic. However, in total viewership rank, Bill Maher stood at 19th. Unrivaled was 131st. This discrepancy highlights that while the core demographic might be faintly present, the broader audience, the casual viewer, the mass market, is entirely absent. Another game that night, Phantom versus Vinyl, also on TNT, sat at 125th, and on True TV, the Phantom versus Vinyl broadcast plummeted to 229th in total viewership rank, with a mere 20,000 viewers in the demo. The story remains the same for Saturday, January 24th. The Lunar Owls versus the Breeze managed 30,000 viewers in the demo, but languished at 143rd in total viewership. The Hive versus Laces on True TV sat at 167th with 20,000 demo viewers. These are not the metrics of a booming sports property. These are the metrics of niche programming fighting for survival in the darkest corners of the cable package. Now, in an effort to be intellectually honest and perhaps overly charitable, let us extend the olive branch of generosity to Unrivaled. I am going to give the league the benefit of the doubt, a tremendous benefit. I will speculate on the total viewership numbers by applying a significant multiplier to these demo numbers. Let us apply a 4x to 5x multiplier for the TNT broadcasts. If we see 30,000 in the demo, we can generously extrapolate that to somewhere between 120,000 and 150,000 total viewers. For the 20,000 demo number, we are looking at perhaps 80,000 to 100,000 total viewers. If a broadcast were to hit 50,000 in the demo, that might translate to 200,000 to 250,000 total eyes. For True TV, the multiplier would logically be lower, perhaps 2 to 3 times the demo number. Why am I using these specific multipliers? I am deriving them from last year's data to ensure we are comparing apples to apples. Last year, a matchup like Laces versus Owls hit 50,000 in the demo and garnered 190,000 total viewers. That is slightly less than a 4x multiplier. Phantom versus Rose had 30,000 in the demo and 140,000 total viewers. So, by offering a 5x multiplier in my speculative analysis, I am being more than fair. I am practically inflating the balloon for them. Even looking at the lower end, matches that had 40,000 in the demo and 190,000 total, we are consistently seeing a ceiling that is incredibly low. So even when we apply the most favorable mathematical models, even when we give them the higher end of the reasonable doubt, the conclusion is inescapable. They are losing viewers. The audience has turned the channel. They are not growing. They are shrinking. People have tuned out. And yet, it is against this backdrop of statistical failure that we are presented with a press narrative that borders on the farcical. We see headlines proclaiming that Unrivaled's long game is paying off. We read articles such as the one by Melanie Vander, and one cannot help but wonder about the transactional nature of such glowing coverage, stating that revenue, reach, and fan demand surge in Season 2. This disconnect creates a cognitive dissonance that is difficult to reconcile. The article asserts that Unrivaled is showing strong momentum in its second season. It claims significant gains across revenue, viewership, merchandise, and fan engagement. It argues that the league is reinforcing its long-term vision. But we have just dissected the viewership numbers. We know, based on the data, that the viewership gain claim is statistically dubious at best. The season began 2 weeks ago, and the numbers do not lie. It is vital to note that the comparison numbers I cited, the ones showing higher viewership last year, were from Week 3 and Week 4 of the inaugural season. I did not cherry-pick peak ratings from the finals to make this season look bad. I tried to be as fair as I possibly could be. I am not here to bury Unrivaled. I am here to report the reality. And the reality is that the viewership is down significantly. So how do we square this with the claim from league sources that Unrivaled is on track to surpass $40 million in revenue, a purported 48% increase from last year? Let us look at the mechanics of the league this year. They have added 2 new teams. They have added more games. They have added more nights of programming. They are traveling to Philadelphia. They have added more seats in the arena. Mathematically, if you increase the inventory of games and merchandise by expanding the league, your gross revenue should increase. If you sell 2 more teams' worth of jerseys, your revenue goes up. But again, I return to the fundamental question of profit. With the expansion to Philly, with the overhead of new teams, with the logistical costs of a longer season, is that $40 million representative of a healthy business? Or is it merely a larger churn of cash in a system that is bleeding money? $40 million in revenue is a nice headline. Congratulations are in order for the billing department. But if the costs have escalated by 60% to achieve a 48% revenue bump, the business is in a worse position than it was previously. The article goes on to tout that social performance continues to climb, with opening weekend views and impressions up 27% compared to last year. It speaks of engagement rising 6.6%. This is where the situation becomes truly fascinating and perhaps indicative of a broader problem in modern sports consumption. We are seeing a divergence where the digital footprint expands while the actual consumption of the core product collapses. What this data tells us is that people are clicking on Twitter clips, they are liking Instagram posts, they are watching the highlights on TikTok. But those very same people, the ones driving up the impressions and the engagement metrics, are steadfastly refusing to turn on their televisions and watch the actual games. They are engaging with the idea of the league, or perhaps the fashion of the league, but not the sport of the league. This reinforces the notion of the highlight-driven approach mentioned in the report. It is an admission that this is becoming a highlight league. It is not a sit-down and watch the full game league. It mirrors the existential crisis facing the NBA, where Commissioner Adam Silver has practically conceded that fans do not need to watch the games anymore. They can just catch the highlights. If Unrivaled is leaning into this, they are building a house on sand. You cannot sustain a broadcast rights deal, which is the lifeblood of any professional league, based on Instagram likes. TNT and True TV cannot monetize a retweet the same way they can monetize a Nielsen household. Furthermore, we are told that merchandise sales are on the rise, up 54% compared to the same period last season. Again, we must look at this critically. You have 2 new teams, ergo, you have new merchandise streams that did not exist previously. But we also know, based on the viewership data, that there are no new fans. In fact, there are fewer fans watching. So what is occurring here? It appears that the existing core fan base, the diehards who watched last year and stuck around, are simply spending more money. They are buying more jerseys, more hoodies, more sweatpants. This paints a picture not of a growing sport, but of a niche lifestyle brand that happens to play basketball. The fans are treating it as a merchandising opportunity, a way to signal support financially, while simultaneously disengaging from the actual on-court product. It is a paradox. The revenue is up, the merch is moving, the social media admin is busy, but the television screens are dark. One must ask, is this sustainable? Can a league survive when its primary metric of success, viewership, is in freefall, even as it generates cash from peripheral sources? The long game that the league pundits speak of seems to be paying off in every category, except the one that matters most for long-term viability: people actually watching the sport. The optics of this are undeniable. We have a league that is projecting success through carefully curated financial leaks, while the objective third-party data shows a product that the general public, and even the sports-watching public, has largely rejected. When you compare a 20% drop for the UFL to a 47% drop for Unrivaled, you are looking at two different trajectories. One is a correction, the other is a collapse. It brings us back to that initial, uncomfortable question about your friends and coworkers. If Unrivaled were truly generating the fan demand that the headlines claim, you would hear about it. You would see it in the wild. Instead, we have a silent majority who are unaware it is on, and a shrinking minority who are tuning in. The revenue is a shield, a deflection from the unvarnished truth that the interest simply isn't there. As we move forward, we must continue to scrutinize these numbers with the rigor they deserve. We cannot allow press releases to mask the reality of the ratings. 30,000 viewers is a statistic that speaks for itself. It tells a story of a league that has failed to capture the imagination of the public, regardless of how many hoodies they sell. Tell me what you truly think. Is the Highlight League model a viable future, or is Unrivaled masquerading as a success while its foundation erodes? Are the merchandise numbers a sign of health, or just a sign of a loyal but shrinking cult following? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, because as this season progresses, the disparity between the revenue claims and the viewership reality is likely to grow even wider, and we will be here to document every baffling moment of it. Take it easy.